Welcome back to HR on the Mat, where we talk about the lessons that we've learned about people, business, and the workplace. Today, we're joined by Max Yoder, CEO of Lessonly. Welcome, Max. We're excited to have you with us today.
I am pumped to be here. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Peggy. This is going to be fun.
It is. We're really excited.
So tell us, Max, give us some perspective now that we're sitting here in the spring of 2021, what 2020 has been for you, and if you've got any kind of nuggets in terms of lessons you've learned and correlated it back to your team there at Lessonly.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I have some lessons I learned the hard way. So I think the way I reacted to the pandemic, I found that I was a lot less emotionally stable than I thought I was. I think what I thought emotional stableness was just the world kind of going normally, and I can cope with the world going normally. I got pretty used to that, right? When it stopped going normally, I found that I didn't have the tools that I thought I had. So my therapist pointed out to me before COVID, actually right when COVID was ramping up, that I really appreciate stimulation and that I value stimulation, and that a lack of stimulation is something that I almost consider not good. So he asked, like, hey, Max, do you kind of equate stimulation to good and a lack of stimulation to bad? And nobody had really pointed that out to me before. So I responded to him like, yeah, absolutely, I do. And he's like, it might be worth, he goes, I wonder what might happen if you looked at them differently, where they both have value. We need stimulation and we need a lack of stimulation. And what I found was he was spot on. And so I developed some practices around calming and encouraging myself. And I kind of think of them as 3 R's. And I like to say these 3 R's give me roots. So it's like triple R roots. And those roots are rituals, resources, and reappraisal. So what are the rituals that I do that calm and encourage myself? What are the resources that I use to calm and encourage myself? Those are relationships in my life. I don't call them relationships directly because I think of a resource differently than a relationship. I can have a relationship with a lot of people. The resources are the relationships that I use for calm and encouragement, right? They're the ones that are active. I could have a relationship that I've not tapped into for 5 years. I do not consider that a resource because resources are active. And the big reason it's important to make that distinguish in the opinion of myself, but I learned this from a gentleman named Rolf Holmquist, who is in the Air Force, and he's a chaplain in the Air Force. And he's like, if you don't get your resources together when you're strong, you might not do it when you're weak. And he sees that a lot with people in the Air Force. They have one significant other as a resource. Combat and the life that is being an Air Force infantry person is tough, and if that resource gets too much strain on it, they lose that one resource and they have no others, no backup. And he's like, and I don't see people in that moment go and call distant relationships to build resources when they're in the hole. He's like, they got to be ready, they already have to be there. So that was a good message for me. How do I develop my own resources? First rituals, then resources, and then reappraisals. And this is the one that I think it's the biggest tongue twister, but it's a pretty simple idea. Reappraising is this idea of when I initially have an experience, I appraise that experience. I basically, something happens, an event happens, I have an emotional reaction to it. I'm excited, or I'm sad, or I'm frustrated. Reappraisal is going back to that at a later date and finding the gift in it. That thing happened, I was frustrated, where is the gift? And it's hard to see the gift in that immediate moment. I can get better at doing so, but what I can do almost all the time is go back and reappraise something, and that kind of helps me release it, release the experience and find the gift in it. And ultimately, I can reappraise faster the more I do it. I can get bad news yesterday, and by that night, be like, okay, there's going to be a gift here. Because everything I can find a gift in whatever I want. So those are my 3 R's: rituals, resources, and reappraisals, and they give me roots so that when I get beat to hell by a big wind or a big storm, I'm like a tree that doesn't get blown over by that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that is great. You're actually saving people money from having to go to the therapist right now.
Heck yeah, good.
You gave some great tools to everybody.
Good. Well, thanks for listening. I'm really pumped to dig into those and write about them further.
Yeah, well, and it correlates so much to what happens in the yoga practice. And we talked before we got on this call about kind of the root of this HR on the mat, which is that Peggy and I, as yoga practitioners, saw so many correlations to what was happening on the mat and in the community of a yoga practice, if it's virtual or it's actually in studio, and correlations to personal life and professional growth. And so we were talking about resources, and we've had some other guests on talking about the importance of community and having that different aspects of those resources in their practice as their kind of quote unquote yoga tribe to help build them up and encourage them, provide that safe spot where you can be vulnerable.
Right.
And I encourage, I'm so excited that you shared one, that you were vulnerable enough with us and our listeners around going to a therapist, because one of the things we talk about in yoga all the time is this mindfulness practice. And more often than not, we have to sneak it in. People don't really want it, some folks don't actively seek out that meditation or mindfulness practice. So do you mind sharing a little bit more? Because this whole piece about going back and to your reappraisals and reevaluating the situations. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about kind of how you do that, techniques that you use when you're doing that reappraisal for yourself? And then how do you share that with the rest of your organization? Because those are such amazing gifts to be able to reappraise your initial emotional reactions, and something I think we're all working for.
Yeah, it's something that again and again, this doesn't need to be scientifically proven, that if I can find a gift in something, it lightens my day, but it continues to get scientifically proven. Like over and over again, people with an aptitude for positive reappraisal are healthier. So it's a skill we can all develop. Not as easy for everybody, right? If I have a ton of trauma growing up, which I fortunately did not, it's tougher to positively appraise. So I don't want to go around saying like, hey, this is easy and everybody should do it. I do think everybody should do it. I don't think it's easy for everybody. I think I have a natural proclivity to finding gifts and stuff, just because I've had a lot of gifts myself, right? A lot of gifts have been given to me myself. When it comes to how I share this with the team, I share this exact breakdown, the roots breakdown of rituals, resources, reappraisals with the team, saying like, hey, we might have a 2021 that looks like 2020, and I don't want to get my ass kicked again. And I don't want you to either. And my goal there was simply to share things that have worked for me, not to tell somebody what to do. Just say, hey, this works for me, and if you want to try a part of it, great. If you don't, great. I find that the Taoist philosophy of not pushing is super important. And if you want people to hear you, like me going, everybody needs to do this, it shuts out a lot of folks.
In yoga, we talk a lot about self-compassion, and that self-compassion is often that compassion at its root is a shared experience. And so a lot of times those folks who are already expressing self-compassion and practicing that way to share it first and be vulnerable. And I know being vulnerable is one of the first nuggets of knowledge in your book. Can you share more about that, and how you've given vulnerability and how you've received it as well?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't think there's a whole lot of potential on a team if people are unwilling to be vulnerable. And when I say be vulnerable, I think some people hear this like, all right, does that mean people have to cry at work? Not necessarily. That could be a part of it though, right? I'm not against it, but it's not the definition of being vulnerable, right? The way I define being vulnerable is acknowledging reality. So it's basically expressing whatever my inner vibe is. So if my inner vibe is, and I like to keep my vibes to I words, like I feel X, and actually stating feelings, not thoughts, right? Because then they can turn into judgments pretty quickly. So what is vulnerability to me? Well, if I'm sad about something and I feel that inside of myself, and then I say I'm sad out loud to somebody when they ask me about that experience, that's me being vulnerable. I'm in sync with what's happening inside of me. If I'm excited about something, maybe there's a new project at work, maybe there's a new venture, and I tell somebody that I don't really care, that's a lack of vulnerability, right? Because I'm not acknowledging my reality. But if I say, hey, I'm pumped about that. So what I find is vulnerability is not just important on the stuff like nervousness or being scared or being sad. It's also just as hard on excitement. And we see this a lot with men, right? Who don't want to say that something excites them or stimulates them, or that they love something, because the reason is vulnerability, right? And it's not just a man thing, but I think I see it more in men of being uncomfortable saying they love stuff, right? Which is almost the opposite end of the spectrum. Like saying I'm really sad about something and I love something, like both of them are hard. And so being vulnerable is just saying what's happening. So if I'm frustrated, I say I'm frustrated. If I'm pumped, I say I'm pumped. If I say I'm confused, if I am confused, I say I'm confused. You get the idea. And if people don't do that at work, well, then we're constantly putting on this front. We're not really getting to what's happening, right? And if we all kind of understand what's happening, we can support one another. We probably want to understand one another better, probably communicate more clearly. In the book, Do Better Work is all about clarity and camaraderie, being clear, seeking clarity. Each of us is going to leave out background information, pertinent details, because we're going to assume other people know stuff that they don't, right? It's just the curse of knowledge. So it's my job to ask clarifying questions, knowing that. I know that every person does that, myself included. So I should ask clarifying questions. That's how we get to clarity. I should be vulnerable. That's how we get to clarity. And then camaraderie, this idea of mutual trust and respect between two people. How do we develop that? Well, we certainly can't if I'm unwilling to share with you what's going on, right? I don't trust you. And that's camaraderie is mutual trust and respect. And if I trust and respect you, I can say, hey, I'm nervous about this thing over here. Can we talk about it? And we can potentially avoid a big problem. Or I'm pumped about this thing over here. Can we talk about it? And we can potentially find a big opportunity, right? So vulnerability is the through line for the entire book. It is not possible to do any of the behaviors if you're unwilling to be vulnerable. So I think it's like the linchpin of what matters at work.
One of the things I think of when I talk about vulnerability, or when I hear people, is really kind of showing something that's not perfect about themselves.
Amen.
Which I perfectly imperfect.
Yeah. And showing, and when I think of the yoga mat, it might be that tree pose that ends up falling over a little bit. But when you see the instructor doing that and that happening to, or them trying something, pushing themselves beyond, but maybe failing at it, I think that is a great parallel to, as a leader as well, kind of sometimes admitting, I don't have this, or I'm not sure.
No doubt.
Going. Like, I love that you're talking about the emotional part too. That kind of not knowing, like, as a leader and CEO, do you sometimes feel like, gosh, I'm supposed to be the one with the answers?
Well, I preach, I say again and again that leaders learn the answer. So I feel very comfortable showing that, and the opposite is leaders know the answer. Now, have I felt that way in the past? Oh, yes. Will there be moments where I have to catch myself and not do it again? Oh, yes. Right. Like, this is a practice, not a light switch. I don't just like become somebody who can be vulnerable and then it stays that way. Right. It's a continuous practice, like a muscle. I got to keep building it and keep it built.
Which is very yoga-esque.
Well, that's why we talk about it's a practice, not a perfect, right? And there's
Amen.
There's always opportunities to escalate, de-escalate based on what's happening in your body, physically, emotionally, mentally, and it all comes down to the yoga mat, and it comes holistically when you present yourself for your practice. So
you're onto it. This is the stuff that matters. Like, this is the yoga gets to the root of stuff, right? It's not kind of concerned with the branches. It gets to the root of a person's ability to self-regulate, ability to care for themselves and have compassion for themselves. Like, what is more deep into the root than that? Right? If I can self-regulate and have compassion for myself, that's going to pervade every other behavior that I have. That's going to influence every other behavior that I have. So, we couldn't be more in agreement. And to the question of like, hey, am I comfortable saying I don't know, or I don't know the answer? That's what I get asked a lot. Hey, how will my teammates interpret my vulnerability? I worry they won't want to follow me, right? And so at that point, it becomes a reminder to folks that it's not all or nothing. If I say I don't know something, it doesn't mean that I don't have confidence at the very same time that we can figure it out. Mm-hmm. So in the exact same moment, saying I'm uncertain what to do next, but I'm certain we'll figure it out. Same sentence, right? Certainty and uncertainty at the same time. And that's what people need. They need you to not be completely uncertain about everything. That's not going to work. And also completely certain about everything also doesn't work, because who wants to hang out with that, right? Somebody who knows every answer.
And it's a journey. You don't have to get there. And that's like with the yoga practice. You might start out one day with your foot just leaned against your leg, but confident that someday I think I'm going to be able to get it up there. I might fall times in between, but those micro adjustments and the fine tuning that you do to your muscles along the way, I think is fun. It's just really fun to see that growth and those incremental changes. And we can see that with people on our teams.
Right.
I'm sure you've seen some people who started with you just grow like crazy over the years.
Yeah. I think of one person in particular who, sorry, Courtney, I'll be real quick, who just changed. Like, he just came into the business and said, like, it's a little uncomfortable for me, all this vulnerability stuff. And now he's like a pro, he's just practiced it so much. And so it gives me a lot of encouragement that, like, you can pop into the business and be like, whew, this is a little out there for me, and then try it and get on, and keep going and have a completely different posture. And I've spoken to his wife, and she just like, this is really good for him, and I've seen the benefits, and it's just like, what a gift, like, there's no better motivation than that.
We spend a lot of time at work, so it needs to be a positive experience for us, because it does extend our families too, how we show up at home too.
It does. It does.
World, because those barriers have been so blurred. And I don't know, Max, if you've read any of Thich Nhat Hanh's books. He's one of the Buddhist monks that's got several different books, but he spends a lot of his time talking about the duality, and you can't experience true joy if you don't experience true sorrow. And you have certainty if you haven't experienced uncertainty, and that you really need those dualities in order to fully experience life and your resources and everything else that's happening in the world, and be able to put that in. So as we think about, the blurred barriers between work life and and personal life, where there used to be the 9 to 5, right? That's been gone now. And you think about this duality as you look forward to 2021, what's something that you're really excited about? And then also something that's maybe the silent challenge that no one's yet talking about in your mind from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, I actually think the answer is the same for both of those questions. The idea that I'm really excited about, and I think I will be till I die, is wholeness versus perfection. And wholeness recognizes the duality of life, that it is not possible to have joy without sorrow. It is not possible to have emptiness without walls, right? Like we put up a wall and then we have, or let me say that a little differently. It's not possible to have light without dark. You get the idea. Very yin yang stuff, right? Yeah. It's not possible to be good at something without being bad at something, right? Yeah. And as I get good at one thing, I might lose muscles in another thing. Like this is constantly happening. It's a big trade-off. And there's nothing wrong with that or bad about that. But the Western world, and this is something that Alan Watts pointed out to me in his book, The Watercourse Way, which is all about Taoism. He's like, the Western world is obsessed with basically progress, as though there is no decline. It is not a give and a get, right? It's just a get. We just want to find the gets, right? And that's why perfectionism is such a problem, right? Because people think I'm just going to get better. I'm just going to get better at stuff, or I'm just going to be great at it, or I'm trash, right? They think in a binary term of I'm great or I'm trash. So I'm either awesome at this thing or it's terrible. Wholeness takes on a whole different perspective. Wholeness says I am probably have some strength in some areas, some qualities that maybe are above average based on the normal population of my peers. Probably have some qualities that are just perfectly average, and I probably have a bunch of qualities that are also below average, and that's just because I'm a human, right? It accepts the whole human experience is what wholeness does. And if I accept the whole human experience, which includes things like being greedy, which people struggle to say out loud, I'm greedy, but guess what? Who freaking isn't, right? And if we don't look that in the eye, and who isn't envious? I mean, envy might be the core thing that makes the world go round. And we're uncomfortable saying that it's happening, right? But it's a natural reaction to things, right? And if we deny it, then we have to deny a part of ourselves. So wholeness doesn't let us deny any part of ourselves. If it's happening, it's happening. And if we look it in the eye, I bet we can mediate it. I bet we can, what's the word for it? I bet we can temper it. Temper it doesn't mean squash it, right? It means kind of use it more in a controlled way than a out of control way. But if I don't look it in the eye, I can't see it. And I'm a lot more scared of things I can't see than the things I can see. So it's just my job to see myself,
That's a great point. I really like that.
Thanks for listening. Yeah, wholeness over perfection, baby. That's what I'm thinking about.
Well, that's an easy one. I can accept that. So so at Purple Ink, where I work, we are really big on Clifton strengths. So we're really talking our language with the fact that, some people have been really given talents. Yeah. And likewise, they've got some things that they really struggle with, and you have to work harder and they drain you more. The more and more you have to do those things, they really drain you because you're not designed and maybe given those talents. But talents can kind of sit here, and if you don't work and practice and work harder and harder on those talents, you're not going to develop strengths. Right. So, and usually if you're good at something, you want to keep practicing it. People look at Monet's painting of the water lilies and they think, he's just talented, and he painted it like 260 times or something.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So yes. You're talking my language with the strengths and gifts and everything.
Well, and the strength is a weakness, right? Like, just like the duality of things. Like, I have every one of my strengths, I've seen the other side of it, right? I've seen how I can take it to an extreme, or I can get myself into trouble by overplaying my hand. You know, like that's another thing my therapist says. He's like, our strengths can overplay their hands. They can, you know, they can push it too far. Something works, just keeps pushing, and then it gets to an extreme state where we've gone too far, you know? And so understanding that I can take a strength and turn it into a weakness in a heartbeat, in a moment. Over here, it's a strength. Over there, it's a weakness. Yeah, that's the duality of the whole thing. You mentioned Monet. If you've heard of Joseph Albers, let me show these to you. I make these little squares, and these Joseph Albers. Yeah, Joseph Albers is a color theory guy. He's a painter, and he studied at Bauhaus, and he loved color. And he made 2,000 of these squares, but he painted them instead of making them out of Legos. And he did 2,000 of them over 20 years. And they're amazing. You know, these amazing pieces of art that if you stand in front of one, you know, I've actually unfortunately never seen a real one in my life. I've only seen duplicates, but I can get lost in the colors. And he did these when he was like 60 years old. And he was a good painter before that, but he, you know, practiced his ass off for 20 years, making 2,000 of these things. And we just don't talk enough about practice. We don't talk about enough about, we're either good at it or we're not. And if we're not good at it, and we try and we've learned we're not good at something, then it's really easy to just be like, well, it's just not for me. It's like, you gotta freaking practice. You gotta
practice. And we always talk about in yoga that, you know, the part of the practice is the joy and the learning of the journey, right?
Right.
I mean, there's so much to be gained from the journey, and not necessarily the destination, and how big that is, not only, you know, certainly on your mat when you're trying to move from one modification to an advancement in a posture, but what that actually means from a mindfulness perspective, to be present, to understand how the mind body is connecting in the practice, to physically move your leg up or balance or whatever you're trying to do. But taking that idea of being really present to understand how there is connectivity between the mind, body, muscle, emotions, and that all plays in to how you show up on your mat every day. And it will be different every single day you show up.
Right.
And then being able to, with that presence, being able to mindfully make the shifts and move the way that you want to move that is aligned with your purpose. Right. Do you mind sharing with us like any practices, or how do you stay present with everything going on? Congratulations on your new daughter. Thank you. Exciting, but that's, you know, that in and of itself it's such a life-changing moment. And so how do you stay present with all of the stuff that's happening, awesome, amazing things in your personal life and awesome, amazing things happening in your professional life? How do you stay present in the moment to make that connectivity of everything that's happening around you?
Yeah, I struggle with it greatly. And, you know, I think the important thing to mention here is everything that I've talked about here, I struggle with greatly. None of the things that are super duper important to me, kind of down to the roots of things, right? The rituals, the resources, the reappraisals, all of them take me a tremendous amount of work. Right. Yeah, I said reappraisals comes more naturally to me. It does, but there's going to be moments when I just totally don't do it. Right. And I have to remind myself to get back. So I say that out loud just because I don't want to ever have anybody hear this idea of perfectionism in any way. I just think it's so corrosive. Right. This is a practice, and this is a practice that I'm going to struggle with. And then the other days I'm going to do well. One of the things that helps me in that practice is being my own witness, the idea of watching myself and following what I do. And so when I say following what I do, an example that I've used in the past is if I drink a Red Bull, being my own witness, watching myself, like as though I'm outside of myself, would be there I am drinking a Red Bull. And then there I am after I drink the Red Bull, feeling energetic. And then there I am after I drink the Red Bull and feeling energetic, feeling irritable. So I'm following what's happening, right? I do the thing and then I feel stuff. Maybe I do something else and I feel stuff. And if that's a pattern, which as I've observed myself, I might find patterns, I might begin to conclude less Red Bull might mean less irritability, right? And it might not be worth the energetic moment in between. And so by being my own witness, I can come to those conclusions without judging myself, right? Without being like, you're an idiot for drinking that Red Bull because now you feel irritable, right? It's not about that. It's just about following the behavior and finding patterns. And when I see patterns I like, that, you know, that bring me closer to what I care about, I'll double down on them. And when I don't, and I continue, then I find patterns I don't like and I keep doing them. And that tells me something, right? And that's what I learned over quarantine. Patterns I didn't like. It wasn't like I was my own witness and then I just stopped doing them. It took a lot more effort than that. Okay, well, what am I going to replace this pattern with, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how much am I going to go back to that pattern again and again? These patterns are patterns because they probably soothe me in ways that are quick and easy, right? So being my own witness is not enough. Action has to follow, but being compassionate with myself when I go back to that pattern and asking myself, what happened before that? What happened today that I'm going back to this pattern that I know does not serve me tomorrow? Those are the conversations I have to have with myself. Because then I can find out, oh, there's parts of my day that, might not be healthy for me. And that might be why I'm doing this unhealthy pattern at night. So just watching myself, right? And then, and observing and not judging, and then deciding what I want to do based on the patterns that I see, is, I think, a compassionate way to go about it.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you something, and we didn't really talk about this specifically, but I do know, from your company, like you guys have some great employee benefits, and I think you have a meditation room, right? And maybe in-house yoga. And since yoga is something that we all share a passion about too, like how has that become a part of how you deal with things, and how does that fit in your life?
Yeah. So I'll speak for the Calm Alama room, which is a place where you can either nap or just be quiet in a dark space, or the yoga room, which is kind of a padded floor, where we have different yoga instructors at Lesson Lee who they're teammates, and they also are certified in yoga, and they'll give lessons. I don't do a lot of the group stuff. I'll come to those events, but I'm not there every week. More for me, I've got my rituals. Like I take a hot bath. That is a ritual for me. I take a nap every day. That's a ritual for me. I will meditate. I won't meditate every day, but the more I do it, the better I feel. These are things I can go back to. And so as I observe myself, I'm finding what are the things that when I do them, I tend to feel energized or clear-minded. Walking being one of them. That's my greatest gift. Just getting outside, walking. Sometimes I'll be on the phone. Sometimes I'll be doing nothing. Sometimes I have my baby on my back, and she'll be in my backpack, and she just looks around, and just in wonder the whole time. So I don't know if that's what you're asking. I'll pause to see.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Max, we certainly appreciate all the time that you've given us. We've got one last question for you, which is,
please.
There was a piece of advice that you could give young Max Yoder. What would it be and why?
And it changes the course of my life if I give it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd give it then, because I like where I went. I like where I'm at. But just play the game. To say something that really matters to me, which I think is the heart of the question.
Yeah, and it doesn't really have to change your life. Just maybe a nugget, a word of wisdom that either maybe would have made it easier, or maybe you would have gone deeper into something that was a learning that maybe I know for me that one of my tendencies when things get hard is I'm an escape artist. And so I will tend to leave, right? And that's something I've discovered about myself. It happens certainly on the yoga mat. As soon as a position feels uncomfortable, I'm like, okay, when do I get it out of this? And that translates sometimes how I also experience life outside of my mat. And so it's one of those things that if I could go back and talk to a younger version of myself, I'd be like, there's so much to learn. When it gets uncomfortable, that's when you root in, right? And that's what learning is. And so I wish I could have given myself that nugget of knowledge, because I think that while it probably wouldn't have changed the trajectory, I probably could have learned a lot more and experienced life in a richer format than I did, because I was always trying to escape when it got hard.
Well,
yeah, it's beautiful.
It might be, Max, that maybe it's not to your younger self, but younger people out there.
Sure.
Do you have anything that you think, because, as a mom, I know my kids don't listen to me, even though I have just mounds of wisdom and experience.
Sure. Yeah. But I hear you.
Somehow another kid might listen to me.
Right.
So you've got kind of that platform where people will look at you and they're like, hey, he's, a leader and he's cool and he's very evolved. I should listen to Max.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Two things come to mind, and I would, two things come to mind that have just changed my life. Emotional liberation, this idea that I am not a slave to other people's feelings. And most of my life, I've believed that I was responsible for other people's feelings. So if the people around me had feelings, they were struggling, I carried those struggles as if they were my own. And I thought it was my duty, but it was really my sickness. And I can be compassionate for individuals and care about their feelings, but not carry them. And that's going from emotional slavery to emotional liberation. And that is, I don't know if there's been a more important arc in my life than getting closer to emotional liberation. Am I there? Like I'm fully liberated? No, that's going to take me a very long time, because I've learned how to be emotional slave for most of my life. Other people's feelings are not my responsibility. What is my responsibility is what I say, what I do, my intentions, and how those come through. So taking responsibility for my own actions. I got so lost in what other people were doing that I lost my way for myself. So that's my second one, which is, emotional liberation is the ticket. If you Google emotional liberation or emotional slavery to emotional liberation, there's some great literature out there that teaches the 3 stages. The first one's emotional slavery. The next one's disavowing other people's feelings. Like we get so fed up with being slaves that we're like, screw everybody's feelings, just no more feelings. Mm-hmm. And then the third stage, which is actually the place where ideally I end up, is the liberated state of I care about other people's feelings, but I don't carry them. And so what's the other thing? Well, to see it, be it is the other thing, which is this idea of, and I'll be quick on this, but I think this is like, I don't know if there's, outside of emotional liberation, a more important thing to me. It's really easy to care a lot about what other people are doing and to spend a ton of time being like, well, look at all these people over here not doing this thing, or look at all those people over here messing this thing up, and then not worrying about our own actions. But the only thing I control is my actions. First time I ever held my daughter, I was holding her in my arms and the nurse came over and she pushed my shoulders down gently. And because I was tense, I was like wearing my shoulders like earrings up here. Mm-hmm. And she's, and because my daughter, she was trying to get comfortable in my arms, and I was responding with my own discomfort, right, with my own tenseness. So she said the easiest way for baby to relax is if you relax, right? Like that's the surest route is you relaxing. Doesn't mean it's going to work, right? But that's my number one job. Soothe myself if I want her to be soothed. Mm-hmm. How beautiful is that, right? If somebody's coming at me agitated and I come back at them with agitation because I want them to be calm and they're not, so I come back with agitation, that's super confusing, right? Super confusing because I want them to be calm. So my job is to exhibit calmness, which is really freaking hard when somebody's agitated right in front of me. But it's what I want them to be, right? I want them to be calm. So show them what it looks like, not to make them feel dumb or to shame them or to guilt them, simply because that's what I want in the experience, right? That's how I want people to show up. So if I want to see it, I need to be it. And it might not change anything about the other person's behavior, but I'm still doing my damn job, right? And if I'm unwilling to do the thing that I want somebody else to do, well, then I should probably give up. Like I should probably let that go. If I'm unwilling to do it myself, I should probably not hold them accountable to it, right? That's not fair. But if I'm willing to do it, then I've already solved the problem for myself, right? I'm doing the thing that I want to see other people do. I'm living in alignment with my values. Beautiful. And I stop worrying about what other people are doing because I realize all I can do is focus on what I'm doing. And maybe I'll influence somebody in the process, or maybe I won't, but at least I'm living my values, right? So yeah. 2 answers.
That's my, that reminds me of my favorite phrase, which is, and I've said this before in this, I think, so it's a repeat, but
all good.
You can't change the wind, but you can adjust your sails.
Yes.
I've had that problem where I've tried to change, you want your child to do something and they don't, and
yeah,
other people in your life. And the only thing you can really do is adjust your own reaction and kind of control yourself. So, and we talk, I know, in yoga a lot too about holding space.
And that's exactly what you're doing essentially, is allowing others to experience and feel it the way that to honor their own feelings and to allow them to experience it, and holding that space without taking on that burden yourself, but allowing others to experience it. So it's beautiful. And the lines and applaud you, because you're right, it's not easy to do, and to show that trait as a leader is highly commendable.
And I like that you notice too that you're not trying to make fun of them, like if someone you sort of expect a reaction back. So like having that self-awareness that you have to do it in a way that isn't like patronizing or
this is a human. It's a human, right? Like what do I want to see other people treat humans like humans? Not patronizing, not judgmental. It's not. So it goes back to every part of my behavior. If I don't want to see somebody making somebody feel foolish, I'm not going to make somebody feel foolish, or I'm not going to intend to make somebody feel foolish, right? It just doesn't make sense. Doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. It's not how I want people to treat my daughter. It's not how I want people to treat me. Now, and guess what? When I do it poorly, when I respond with agitation to somebody's agitation, the cool thing about modeling and to see it be it is, what do I want to see somebody do when maybe they do something that they wish they wouldn't have done? I want to see them apologize. So then I just get back on the horse and I apologize. And now I'm doing it again, right? So even when I don't do it, I can keep doing it. By, you know, when I fall short of my own values, I get back on the horse by apologizing, because that's a value of mine. And so this becomes, it's like impossible for me to mess it up if I just follow those, you know, blueprints. I'm either doing it well, hell yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I'm either doing it.
It's going to be a practice as a parent too, because believe me, you
got no idea, my friends, but we're excited for you.
Let's do this during the terrible twos. And
yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I'm going to need a lot of help. That'll be a whole new muscle.
Well, you're already a step ahead of where I was, because believe me, we weren't thinking about emotions at all when we were parenting our first. So anyway, but thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I think there's a lot to learn. I know I'm going to share this with several people, because you just got a lot of great insights to help people feel better about themselves and about, you know, I love this last part about not taking on other people's emotions too. That's just a really great lesson. And your 3 R's. I think there's some really good nuggets here.
Hey, thanks for making time. I loved it.
Yeah, well, we will end in the way that we end our traditional yoga practice.
Please.
And we'll end.
So we'll end with a closing breath together. So inhale, arms up, fill up the belly, the heart, open the throat, palms come to kiss. Exhale down to heart center, bowing the head. Thank you, Max, for sharing all of your lessons with us and our listeners today. Collectively, we honor you and everyone in our community. Together we say, Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. It was awesome.